I am David Waldman of Daily Coast Radio, now joined by Armando and Llorens, who
Hello.
are often here on the air with me, and we are sitting with Senator Byron Dorgan of North Dakota, and we'd like to turn for a little bit to discussion of your latest book, Gridlock.
Senator, I am going to be writing the book review, and I haven't finished, to be honest with you, about a third of the way, but what I've discovered in the first third is I like this type of sort of action techno thriller more than, say, maybe your publisher won't like that I say this, than Tom Clancy, because of course he sold millions and millions of books and made a lot of money. It's a little smarter, in my opinion. And it goes to some interesting policy issues. I do feel like I have to read your first book in the series, which is called Blowout, now in paperback, and we'll get an image of that for the audience in a second. But if I may, I want to go back to the beginning.
Okay.
What started you with this idea of writing this type of book? You've written nonfiction books that were very important, one being Reckless, which is a tremendous book. I recommend it to everybody. But this genre, which I happen to love, what got you there?
Well, this just was almost an accident. I wrote Take This Job and Ship It, and I wrote Reckless, and I thought I was probably done writing, and I wrote those by myself, and then the agent I had for those two books called me one day and said a publisher had contacted him asking whether I would be willing and interested in doing a co-authorship of two books dealing with energy and thrillers or fiction. And I said, sure. Well, actually, I didn't say it that quickly. At first I hedged, and then I thought, well, of course I should do that. I mean, most people have difficulty getting a book published. Here I have an opportunity to be involved in two more books that I think could be interesting. And so the question of what specifically, this book, Gridlock, is about cyber terror. And it's, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction, but the fact is, this book is about the country of Iran and Venezuela and the kinds of people in those countries, the intelligence service and so on, who are looking to do damage to the United States of America. And so they buy a thumb drive from the Russians that was created to put a virus in the American grid system, the electric power grid system, and they hire a drug-addled hacker named Decker from Amsterdam to play with this country by shutting down the power grid in various cities at various times. It's a thriller, but it is not so far from reality. The fact is the National Science Foundation has done studies and so on, and others have, and we've got a vulnerable grid system.
Well, that's actually one of the points of bringing it to the real life. Of course, in the news a lot these days is the NSA and what they're doing. Leaving the issues of Snowden aside, what about the efforts on cyber terrorism? Do you feel confident that what the NSA and what our agencies are doing is appropriate for the risk?
Well, let me say that there are a couple levels here. One, NSA, Snowden, the Chinese, hackers into the financial institutions or the Defense Department or corporations. That's snooping and spying and probably thieving from bank account, whatever. This is different. This is cyber terror. It's a new weapon, a digital weapon that doesn't explode. But the ability to shut down the electric power system in a country can wreck the economy quickly, cause deaths and other things. The ability to shut down a water distribution system or a transportation system. And so this is cyber terror, but it's what Leon Panetta said when he left the Secretary of Defense job. He said, it is very likely that the next Pearl Harbor will be a cyber attack.
Right.
It won't explode, but if in 10 minutes from now, and it's a certain time in the afternoon, if 10 minutes from now, all of the power in this region where we are now talking was shut down, and we didn't know whether it'll be on in an hour, a day, or a month, what would the consequences be? It's when you think through that, these are very serious potential problems for our country. The big issues of cyber terror, and the government is obviously working hard to try to do things about it. But our electric grid system is a couple 100,000 miles of transmission lines, not very coherent actually, because we didn't build an interstate highway of transmission like we did for cars. about 3,500 power producers, tens and tens of thousands of transformers to step power up and step it down. On average, 40 years old, most all of them made overseas. Almost everybody believes this is a pretty vulnerable system. So it's a great plot for a book, which of course is meant to entertain, but the question also will be for people who read this book, what are we doing about it?
Well, that's sort of what I get at, because one of the things that we've talked about as a country is getting our economy going again. And you've been a great, you were, and still are a great fighter for economic justice, raising the minimum wage, making the playing field level and fair. One of the things that we, at least Democrats, thought that the government could do was invest in things that, frankly, we should have been investing in a long time ago. Infrastructure.
Right.
Security of infrastructure. Is that something that, A, we need as a national security issue? And wouldn't that help us on an economic basis?
Absolutely. If we start investing back into the infrastructure of our country, you not only put people to work, but at the end of it, you created an asset. Whether the asset is making robust and strengthening the electric power grid, or building new roadways, or repairing dams. I mean, all of these things invest and leave an asset, but also put people back to work. And you build a better country with it. It's surprising to me that there are so many people now that have this mantra of, we don't want to spend any money. I'm interested in investing money for this country's future. We drive on roads that our grandparents sacrificed to build for us. The old saying goes, we're all warmed by fires we didn't build, right? And I think it's really important for our country to think through, how can we put people to work by investing in infrastructure? And that gets back to this issue of protecting against cyber terror attacks.
Just another question about the book. One of the characters that's most interesting is the protagonist, the sheriff of Billings County, who returns to North Dakota from years away. I mean, to what degree is there some subliminal message of you saying, hey, I wish I could go back to North Dakota?
Yeah, well, Nate Osborne. And Nate Osborne grew up in a small town, and he went off to war, was a hero, lost his leg, won the Medal of Honor, and came back with his wife to live in a small town. And I mean, there's more to the story, but he kind of wanted to come back to where he started and live simply among his old neighbors. But it's hard to live simply because he's a Medal of Honor winner and quite a remarkable guy. And then he ran for sheriff,
and then the problems followed him to North Dakota.
And he connects. I mean, it connects back to someone he knew in Afghanistan who was working with the Russians, and so this book, as I said, I think it's rich in characters, and is a really interesting book. And if you're not all the way through it, so I won't blow the plot.
Yeah, please, no spoilers.
Okay, I won't do that. But there are a couple that are really interesting.
Well, we'll have you back when I'm finished, and we can talk about it again. Or actually, probably be back for the third in the series, because I get a feeling there's going to be a third.
The hacker lives in Amsterdam. He's a drug-addled hacker, but he lives with his woman, and in a commune. So we'll talk after you finish that part about the woman.
Will do.
All right.
Will do. If your co-author, I think, is an interesting person as well. Do you want to talk about him?
David Hagberg, a wonderful guy. David's written a lot of fiction, and I had not. And we got together, and you develop the architecture of a plot. First of all, you're going to figure out what are you going to write about. And I was interested in a couple things, and we wrote about both of them. The first book was about a top-secret government facility that is working on developing language from microbes that chew through coal seams and leave liquid fuel in its wake, and it would be a significant threat to some other parts of the energy industry. This, the architecture of this is, the idea that we're vulnerable to cyber terrorists in ways that we don't think about every day, but in big ways that could bring down the whole economy. And so you build a plot very much like you stick build a house. If you drive down the street and see a home that's just, the frame is up with the 2x4s, that's all you see. That's the way you create a plot, and then pretty soon you slap some wallboard on, and you put a door on it, and you develop characters and fill in the plot, but generally what the plot's going to be. It's really an interesting process.
It sounds fascinating. I mean, I've always wanted to write a book, but now I can barely read one.
Well, this book's available at all the bookstores. It was just published recently, and is available on Kindle and Amazon and Barnes and Noble. So